As a note for today's episode, we wanted to make listeners aware that this episode touches on grief, loss, and pregnancy loss as Steve shares stories from his years as a chaplain.
We Are Vineyard.
Somos Viña.
We Are Vineyard.
Chaplaincy taught me what, to me, has saved my life is all God wants is for me to be exactly human-sized. When I had the courage to look into the darkness of my life, God's already there. I thought I was keeping it from him. I was certainly keeping it from others. But of course, what's true is they could see it. I'm the last to see it. So I finally had the courage to dive into my dark side. And there's the Lord doing his work.
Yeah.
And according to my chaplain supervisors, his most powerful, Peter Keys, great Episcopal priest, he was my boss. You know, he's like, you guys are always trying to graduate from God's power is made perfect in my weakness. Like, you're trying to graduate. He's like, what if it's always that's actually the truth? So then I learned how to walk into a room weak.
Welcome to the We Are Vineyard podcast, conversations to help us grow with Jesus and each other. In today's episode, our host, Jay Pathak, National Director for Vineyard USA, talks to Steve Cuss, the author of Managing Leadership Anxiety, our book of the month. Let's listen in.
Well, Steve, thanks for coming to hang out.
Yeah, man. Always good to hang out with a mic or without a mic.
Yeah, well, and we're sitting in your home, which is a great place to hang out.
It is.
Been here a few times.
My
really
new
great.
office.
This is your new office.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you haven't heard what we do on these yet, but it's really great.
It's global.
It's global.
Yeah, what you guys have gone global in a hurry. Yeah.
It's global.
Central America.
Yeah, exactly. And Nicole's supposed to be checking right now. We were like the number 4 podcast in Costa Rica at one point. So shout out to Costa Ricans.
That.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
Pretty high level stuff. But anyway, so we've been friends a long time. I was trying to think of what year did you appear?
Yeah, I showed up on the scene in 2005. I think we got together 2009 or 10. Because every 3 to 5 years I would hit a wall and think, I've got to change the way I do ministry. I'm not going to make it. And in one of those iterations, I reached out to you for help. So I think that was 2010 or 2009.
2010, 2009, you're like, I either need to go to a new conference or they're going to give me a whole new playbook.
Yeah. Or a new church where I don't have to live with my mistakes. Yeah, just change churches every 3 years. The Salvation Army looks really good. Because every 18 months you move on.
Try a new thing.
Learn.
Find a new place. Yeah. So we started hanging out, and it was, I think I remember our first conversation.
Yeah.
You talking through all the stuff you learned with systems and how I thought I was the smartest person I knew in thinking about family systems.
Yeah.
And then I hung out with you and realized I knew 100th of what you knew.
That's not true.
And that felt really sad to me. All of a sudden, this one thing that I knew about that made me smart, I wasn't very smart anymore.
That is a sad story. It's also not a true story, but I think it takes a while to realize how your experiences shaped you, because they're just your experiences. You don't realize. Right. But, you know, when the first exposure to systems theory is daily death, there's no question that's going to ingrain it deeper than maybe just reading about it.
Yes.
Because for me, it was not too much of an exaggeration. It was like a way to survive trauma chaplaincy. And then to discover, like, the way I've been operating my ministry up until this point was actually completely wrong, well-meaninged.
Right.
But then to discover the incredible power of Christ through this other lens. And I don't know, Jay, it's not my fault that I was a chaplain for a year. It's God's fault.
You're like, Jay, I just went through more trauma than you.
That's actually, I think, it. I think in those early years.
Well, and so we're going to be having you at our LTM in Denver, which I'm really excited about. Yeah. So for those of you that are in our leadership teams, you'll get a chance to meet Steve and see kind of more of his work up close. we're encouraging people to read your book
Yeah.
leading up to it. And then for those coming to the meeting, we're going to be sending you some stuff to look at so we can get ready. So this is sort of a precursor to that, which is fun.
Yeah.
And as is our custom in this podcast, that I'm sure you've listened to every single one, so I need not tell you this, but I will anyway, just in case. I mean, the Costa Ricans know all of it.
Yeah, they're ahead of me. Yeah. Yeah.
Is we spend a good chunk of time hearing people's stories.
Yeah.
So
good.
what I'd love to hear is a bit where you grew up. I can tell from your accent you're from like probably New York or Boston.
A bit further south, but not bad. Yeah, I'm a Southie. Yeah.
So a little where you grew up, and then that'll, I really do want to land with all the chaplaincy and the work that you did there.
Yeah, great.
So tell us a little bit about where you grew up.
Yep, grew up in Perth, Western Australia. On my father's side of the family, sheep farmers, classic, stereotypical rural Aussie sheep and wheat. So all of my spare time was on my uncle's farm, which was just magical. On my mum's side of the family, competitive sailors. Way back in my mum's side, a mule thief who was married to a prostitute. That's how the Cusses got going.
Is that how you end up in Australia then?
That's how my mother's side of the family, they get deported to Australia, 7-year sentence for stealing a mule. John Warby meets Catherine. After 7 years, they get their ticket of leave, the little plot of land, much like homesteading in America, except it was convicts. And then they had 14 kids, and then several generations later, here we are. What's interesting is, Aussies, I didn't even know that was weird until I came to America.
What was weird?
That we're all from convicts.
Convicts.
Yeah, 168,000 convicts started Australia. And it's such a normal part of our history. It was surprising to me when Americans would tease me about it.
Right.
I never got defensive. I was just puzzled. I'm like, why is that funny to you? Because it's cool. And it's amazing. It turns you into an amazing person,
Well, and I think it was a little bit in our friendship that I had done some of my ancestry DNA stuff.
Right.
And on my mom's side, I think it's McQueen, the McQueens were the ones who were leading the folks over. So they were the ones doing this horrible, weird work.
Yeah.
So that's my family.
What we called the whipping parsons is you get to Australia, you're in a chain gang, and then it's the local preacher with the whip.
There you go.
And that would explain in a very simple way why Aussies can't stand the church. Yeah. That would be the simplest explanation, is that whip you during the week and then preach the love of God on Sunday.
Wow.
Not good. Yeah.
No, that's not good. So
and that's my family too. None of my family, there's a lot of great stories about my family. We are very secular. We're also for each other. So one of my favorite stories is I was in America at this point for my theological education. I go home for Christmas. This is maybe 1994. My grandfather's still alive back then. Big Christmas, which is what we had every year. His house is full of 40 relatives.
So connected family.
Very connected.
Right.
Enjoy each other's company. Wonderful. I come home from America. My granddad calls the party. All right, everyone, he says, Steve's going to lead us into family prayer. And I look at my granddad. I'm like, what the hell
is that?
Is the family prayer?
You might want to tell me what that is.
We have never prayed as a family. We don't own a Bible between us. I mean, I do now, of course. But it's my granddad's way of saying, I'm with Steve. I don't believe anything he believes. I think he's actually nuts.
Right.
But I'm with him, and so we're all going to be with him. It was really cool.
Wow.
And that would describe my parents too, and my uncles and cousins. And so we're very close. But yeah, when I was a teenager, my big sister had started going to the local youth group. She had gone to school with the preacher's daughter, who was a gifted evangelist. And Jay, a lot like the way you do it, Elaine Timms, her name was, she would just talk about Jesus very naturally. My sister wanted it. Progressive dinners, all of that stuff in youth group. So my sister became a Christian, and then a couple of years later, she led me to Christ. And my parents, at the time, I thought it was religious persecution. They wouldn't let me get baptized. And it was a Church of Christ that believed in water regeneration.
Right.
So that was terrifying. It was a year before they let me get baptized. And so I'm checking the road literally both ways.
Wait. They wouldn't let you get baptized.
Yeah, they blocked the baptism.
Knowing though that it's the means by which actual regeneration and salvation comes to you.
My parents wouldn't say that. My parents would say, like looking back now as a parent, my parents would say, I think they've joined a cult.
Right.
And as good parents, we better step in because our oldest daughter's gotten a little crazy. She's gone all Jesus freaky.
We got to cut this back somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the church elders said, well, we'll meet with your parents. And so I'm like 14.
Wow.
My sister's 17.
Were you in the meeting?
And we intuitively know this is a terrible idea.
This is going to go bad.
Really badly, because it's two worlds that don't know how to relate to each other.
Of course.
And that really was formative for me, even now as a pastor. I've been a Christian 35 years. I still feel like I'm in both worlds.
Yeah.
And so we convinced the elders and the pastor, don't come over.
Please don't do
We'll
that.
take care of it. We'll handle this. At 14, like mediating.
You can already tell.
Yeah.
Guys, I don't think you know what you're doing.
Because of the Christian lingo and the
Totally.
shoulds and oughts and
Yep.
all the legalism and stuff. So then finally my parents realized, okay, they're serious about this.
Yeah, this isn't a joke. They're going to do this whether we are
Yep.
stopping them or not.
Yep. And my parents, again, full credit to my parents. They're very open-handed parents. And I think my baptism would have been the 5th or 6th time I ever remember them being in church. We'd gone to a few family christenings kind of thing of other families. When my sister got baptized, we went to church. I mean, they're probably into the double digits now because when they come over here, they'll go to church with us.
Sure. To connect to you.
Yeah,
Right.
mostly to watch their son and give them something to be proud about.
Yeah.
And it is crazy. They're proud of me, even though they still don't agree with anything.
What
I
were you
believe.
thinking you'd be before you?
My
decided
whole
to do
life wanted to be a rural vet. I wanted to be a farm vet.
Really?
Oh, nothing but. That's all I'd ever wanted to be. And in high school, I did work study in a vet surgery, and I loved it.
Wow.
I've still to this day have most of James Herriot's books memorized. So people who are watching All Creatures Great and Small, which is a British show that Americans aren't as known, he was the reason I wanted to be James Herriot in Australia. I had my
Really?
plot of land picked out in Pinjarra. I just wanted to deliver sheep and cows. That's what I wanted to do. Put on a long glove. I don't know what that says about me. I just wanted to wear a really long glove.
Hey, I've been in the UK for lambing season on a farm. That's quite a thing.
It's amazing. You've been on a Welsh farm,
It's true.
if I remember right.
That's right. Yeah, it's a whole
super
world.
cool.
You're like keeping an eye on them and making sure that they don't like just keel over dead.
Super cool.
Keep them warm and okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's but I guess
Surprising.
no, it isn't that surprising if you're growing up on a farm.
Well, I grew up in the city,
Okay,
but went
but you
to-
go out to see the
all the
farm,
time.
and you're like, this is amazing. What if I did this?
and James Herriot, he made it look magical. It really did. I mean, I've probably read his books a dozen times each.
Wow. See, I mean, the roads we take.
Yeah.
I thought I'd be a lawyer, which
Right.
I sort of am
Right.
in some ways.
Still makes sense. Yeah.
Exactly, but I'm trying to think of what would be the nearest, easiest way for you to practice. Do you have chickens or?
I have delivered a calf in ministry. And
Okay.
the time it happened, I was so happy. And I
bet
can
you
also,
were.
the other
bet you
skill is
were.
I can hypnotize chickens.
What?
Yeah, which is a great, it's funny, I've not shared this with you
No,
before.
I am
but-
so excited.
Yeah, there's YouTube videos of me hypnotizing chickens. I think I've done it on 5 continents now. I'm global. I'm a global sensation.
Wait. So you hit?
There's a lot to cover
This is-
here.
no, this is
Let's
important.
start with the cow. I was working on a ranch in Montana for teens who would get in trouble. They'd come live on the ranch for a while. It was
Okay.
a working cattle ranch, and there was a cow on the ground struggling. And I said the magical words that I've wanted to say my whole life: "Get me a bucket of warm water and soap," which is what James Herriot. That's the only thing I know.
Right.
Next thing this poor cow knows, this guy is helping.
Getting it done.
She's probably just fine. Like she's probably like, I didn't
I don't
need
need
any help.
any of this.
But yeah, delivered a calf, got to name it, and then of course they ate it right about 2.5 years later. But chicken hypnosis, most Aussies can hypnotize a chicken. If you've got Australian listeners, they can probably hypnotize a chicken.
Wait. Most Aussies
I
can
would say.
hypnotize a chicken.
I would say so. Yeah, that's a generalization, but I think it's accurate. So I've hypnotized chickens in Africa, Europe.
Okay, so how does one do that?
There's several techniques. There's several techniques. My preferred technique is you draw a circle. You need dirt.
Okay.
You need dirt that you can draw in,
Okay.
much like our Lord and Savior drew in
Yes,
the dirt.
that's right.
It's very
Yes.
similar.
Yes.
So first of all, step one is you catch a chicken, and if you're on like in a global trip, developing country
They're around, yeah.
always have the kids catch a chicken. It's very undignifying for a middle-aged man to
kind of
try
waddling.
to chase a
Yeah,
chicken.
yeah, right.
So make the kids get the chicken for you. Also draws a crowd. And then you draw a circle, and then what you're doing is you calm the chicken down. You put it in the circle. You get its beak on the ground.
Okay.
And then you simply take a stick and you very quickly draw a line from its beak straight out. So it's looking at it, kind of makes it cross-eyed.
Okay.
And it'll lay there as long as you want until you clap and wake it up.
Wait. So what is this? What's the circle?
The circle is just party performance. So some people, what they'll do is they'll actually.
So that part doesn't do anything.
Well, so there's a hybrid technique. Some people take the chicken and they will. Do you edit this show? Or is this is all in?
I love all
this. They'll take its beak and they'll show it the circle, and that'll put it to sleep. I've never had success with that.
So you're kind of just spinning
working the
so
chicken
again,
around
it
the
just
circle
sort of gets
disorients
stuck.
the chicken. I prefer to lay it in the circle and then a sharp
Quick line.
line. Just I've hypnotized a turkey in Paraguay.
And it just lays there.
Just lays there, just kind of falls asleep, and the kids go nuts. They just think it's the best.
I must try this.
Yeah.
We have neighbors that have chickens.
My kids have done this. I've passed this trait down. Last time we were in Kenya, my kids had 5 or 6 chickens hypnotized.
I'm excited, Steve. I'm going to make a little commitment to you. Every time I'm with Australians, from now on,
just ask them.
I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to report back to you.
I bet 2/3 will say yes. And 1/3 will look at you like you're the problem. They'll say,
"That's
of course.
Weird.
Of course I can."
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a whole world that I didn't know about you.
My
We've been
favorite time
friends.
was in Albania, and my Albanian friends fundamentally didn't believe it.
They're like,
the
that's
whole,
not real.
The whole week.
You can't do that.
Because the people I go on these trips with, they start sharing, hey, Steve will hypnotize a chicken for you, which is a very odd thing to offer, but still.
I'm going to from now on, if we're ever on a trip.
Oh, we'll do it together.
Yeah.
And so we're on this 10-day trip with my Albanian friends, and for whatever reason, Nikki, who's technically American, but she's basically Albanian, she gets it in her head an hour before the trip is done. I think Steve's telling the truth. I must find a chicken.
I'm going to find a chicken.
And we're on a big bus, and so she explains to the bus driver, first of all.
Where's the chicken?
We need to find a chicken. And he's looking at her weird. Well, then we're going door to door, and she's in Albanian. Hi, I've got this guy. He's from Australia. He can hypnotize a chicken. Do you have a chicken? And we've got video.
And you found one.
Buses pulled over the side of the road, this strange family, and there I am hypnotizing their chicken for him.
And it works.
Of course.
Dude,
of course it does.
It's
magical.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
If I was a little more determined, I would find one right now. But
yeah, there's none in this neighborhood. Thanks, HOA.
Okay,
yeah.
well, I'll work on that. Okay, so you're the potential vet, brand new believer, who's managed to get baptized and figure this out. And then how does the ministry stuff start to fire? How do you start to think maybe I should be a pastor?
Yeah, I loved church, loved it. When the authors of Scripture talk about being lost, that's never been an insult to me. It's like, no, that's just very descriptive.
Yeah.
So for me, church was feeling found. To this day, it feels profound to me. So I love church, and mum and dad, I think, at the time as teens, we were convinced we're being persecuted. I think they were just trying to moderate our faith.
Trying to help, right.
Trying to figure us out.
Totally.
So they restricted our church access, and that forged our faith. My sister and I got really close. And graduated from high school, went to college to be a vet. And 6 weeks into vet school, I hated it. I just was miserable.
Why?
I don't know. I mean, I think the Lord was stirring something, but it was boring. I think as a somewhat impatient human, we weren't getting to the good stuff very quickly.
Right.
Of course, I'm 6 weeks in, first year.
Yeah, you're doing like basic science.
Doing a lot of reading and not much cutting of things. And, So I spent my study break on the beach just praying like, Lord, what's going on? And really felt a strong call to the ministry. And I think because of where I was at with my folks at the time and the way I saw the world, I was convinced they'd kick me out of the family. If I go into ministry, that'll be it. I'll be out of the house. So it took me a week to find the courage to tell them.
Wow.
And finally told them. In Australia, a minister's also a politician, of course, just like in England. And the worst thing you can do with your life in Australia is be a lawyer, politician, or a preacher.
Yep.
My sister's a lawyer.
So 2 of 3 covered.
Yeah. So I say, hey, I want to be a minister. And they're like, what kind
Why?
of minister do you have in mind? Thinking maybe a politician. I was like, I want to be a preacher.
Wow.
And to their great credit, they're like, oh, we think you should totally do that. That would be fantastic. So then they went from restricting my access to church to saying, well, if you're going to be a preacher, you better be there all the time.
Yeah.
Because for my parents, the value is give yourself to whatever you believe in.
Right.
So yeah, it really was for me a mystical encounter with the Lord, which is unusual in our tradition of churches, and kept me in the ministry in some dark days. Like I'd look back on that encounter, like I'm called to this.
And I knew that was God.
And I still, with all the doubt and everything I've gone through, I think, no, that was true.
That actually happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then you go to school. Is that how you end up stateside?
Yeah. Came over here for college because of a preacher named Fred Craddock, who's a big hero of mine, and he was a professor at the college I went to. He had retired by then, but just the way of preaching and his way in the world, I was like, that's it.
Wow.
And then some more pragmatic, I wrote to 3 schools and 1 wrote back. So that's another reason I went to this school, is to actually
Let's do that one.
return the
Yeah,
correspondence.
1 of 3. I'll take it.
Yeah.
So then you show up and you're going through it and it's going pretty well.
It's amazing. It was the best. Yeah. Yeah, I went into college with they give you a Bible entrance exam, and I got 21%. So I could not successfully put Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the correct order. And the registrar gave me my grade. This is like the first 2 weeks of school when they're sorting us all out. I'm still jet lagged, and he was very apologetic. He's like, oh, Steve, I'm so sorry. This is like humiliating. And I'm like, this is amazing, because like if I'm this bad at Bible, this is exactly where
I'm
going
to
to
learn
be.
so much. Yeah.
Wow. And that's what happened. I had great professors. And, you know, Jay, they loved scripture, and so I loved it. Like it was pretty simple. I just watched these men and women who loved scripture kind of enjoy it in front of me. And it was contagious.
Yeah, you just caught it.
To this, still catching it.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
And then when you finish up seminary, then you're like, I guess I'm supposed to do something with this.
Yeah, I did a bachelor's in Bible and preaching, which is a very Bible college-y degree.
I'd say, yeah.
By this time, Lisa and I are engaged. She's on a 5-year double major. So we're going to get married. I need a job.
Overachiever.
Yeah. So I sit down with our job placement guy, and I'm like, I just need anything for a year. What can I do for a year? Any ministry. Anything for experience while Lisa finishes up her degree.
I love this.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, just go work at Taco Bell, because there's no
ministry.
There's nothing you can do for a
right,
year.
Yeah.
So I open Yellow Pages, and I call a secular employment agency. And I'm all embarrassed. I was pretty insecure back then, and I'm embarrassed by my Bible degree. I think a lot of my family not following Jesus made me embarrassed to be a pastor.
Yeah.
So anytime I was in a secular setting back then, I'd kind of have my hat in my hand.
Right.
Hey, and I'm kind of like, I'm just cold calling. I'm like, hey, I need a job for a year, and I've got this like Bible degree. And the guy's like, oh yeah, hey, there's a lot you can do.
And you're like, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
You could do a social work internship. You could do this. And then offhand, he's like, hey, you could be a chaplain, and the local teaching hospital happens to be hiring right now. So I applied, and I got an interview. Didn't know anything about the program. So I get to the interview early, and I read the brochure in the waiting room on clinical pastoral education. So then I walk into the interview, and it's 6 or 8 people. I just thought it would be like some chaplain.
Just random.
Yeah. I'm completely out of my league. The chief executive officer of the hospital,
Oh my
the
goodness.
head of all the social workers, the head of the ethics board. Like, it's serious.
This is a real interview. Yeah.
This
is interview 1.
This is the first interview. They
Wow.
take their chaplains really seriously. I've already submitted my 30-page application. Like, it was a lot. And they said, what do you know about clinical pastoral education? And I said, and I just played, I actually read about
I just read about
your
this.
brochure. So I'm going to spit back to you. They thought that was pretty funny. But I think their very first question to me was, tell us your experience with grief and death. I had a background in sales, and like in the very Michael Scott office way, I knew
enough. I could say,
tell us your weaknesses. Oh, I care too much, that kind of stuff. Right. I knew how to do that.
Right. You're a professional interviewer, and that's
I really was as a sales guy.
Right.
And there's something happened where I realized, I'm out of my depth.
Right.
The chief executive is here. I'd never seen a dead body before.
Right.
And before I knew what to say, I laughed and I said, "Oh, I've never even seen a dead body before." Like I'm making a joke, trying to lighten. And of course, what I know now is I'm so anxious I can't manage it.
Totally.
And they're all stone-faced. I cannot charm this room, which was unusual.
Yeah.
And back in my old days, if I couldn't charm a room, then I would aggressively punish the room.
Right.
Of course, that's not an option in an interview.
No. Yeah. How can you? Right.
So then they just stared at me uncomfortably, and then the next question was, man, I'm right there now, even as I'm talking about it. The follow-up question, they said, okay, well, Steve, if somebody's died and you're a chaplain and you walk into the room and the widow is headbutting the wall in grief, what do you think you would do? And I think to myself...
It's worth listening, like if you're listening, to pause and go, what is your answer to that question?
What would you do?
Mean, because that's not like, there isn't like, oh, well,
You know, the last time that happened is what I did. Exactly. And I just looked at them bewildered and I just said, I have no idea what I don't know. And then I'm expecting...
This is a great interview.
That they will then make me
We should role play this. We should
better.
film this somehow.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, obviously...
Now they're going to help me.
They've got an incompetent kid in the room.
Right.
And about an hour and a half interview, and that was the whole... It never got better.
They just keep doing scenarios?
At one point, one of the chaplain residents just simply turns to me and she just looks at me. She says, "There's something off about you." And
in the middle of all
in
this.
the interview, she just names she's like, there's something
not right.
something missing. And of course, what's missing is any kind of self-awareness,
experience. Yeah, right.
Or even, like, obviously I've kind of faked my way into the room and she just calls
She's like, this isn't real.
Yeah, just names it. I don't remember how it ended. I just remember walking out thinking, well, Taco Bell is...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then they're like, come on back.
They offered me the job.
Did you ever ask them what made them do that?
Yeah. Right. Because I was too young. They usually wanted you to be 30 or older. You're supposed to have an MDiv and previous chaplain experience. And I'm like,
none
what?
of those.
Yeah. And they said, well, you looked open-minded and you had a sense
Flexible.
of adventure about you. So we thought we'd take a chance. Like you're a bit young. Bit young. What's interesting, Jay, I'm 50 now, and now that I'm telling these stories more, because I didn't tell these stories for years.
Right, because they're kind of embarrassing. And
I'm considered, well, the actual like when I'm in a room with a burn victim or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually wondering about going and getting some trauma therapy because the things I saw at a young age that I didn't process.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Because then day one...
Oh, right. Day one
you're in.
You're there's no training.
Like you get a page.
You're by yourself with screaming people or whatever. Yeah, famously they it's intentionally what they're trying to do is get you to the end of yourself as fast as possible. And I think nothing gets you to the end of yourself faster than death. That'll do it.
So they just put you in rooms. And then they sort of process it later with you.
Yeah, an hour and a half every morning. So the shift was 8 till 5, and then 6 times a month, it's 8 in the morning till noon the next day. So we all take turns with these overnight marathons, and then the rest of the week, it's 8 to 5. But 8 o'clock's chapel, 8:30 to 10 is group debrief.
And how many, it's like...
There's 6, in my year, there were 6 residents.
Wow.
So people who watch hospital dramas, they see medical students doing a medical residency. What you don't know is ministry students do a chaplain residency, even today. So right here in Denver, our friend Danielle Reeves, her husband Dave is a chaplain supervisor.
Yeah.
He runs these programs.
He does this. So you all get in there and go, okay, what happened this week?
And we all take turns on the hot seat. So some days it's full open, and the supervisors, you sit in a circle. There's 6 of you and 2 supervisors. And on Wednesday, it's just process. So you'll just stare at each other until someone speaks. And they're teaching you to notice group dynamics, who speaks up all the time, who dominates, who mansplains.
Right.
But they're not telling you to look for that. It's just over a few months you start to notice these patterns.
Right.
And that helps you when you go into a room and you've got a minute to notice these
Figure
patterns.
out what's going on. Who's doing what and why. Yeah.
I could pick, back then, I think I'd be rusty now, but I could predict birth order 60 to 70% accuracy within a minute or two.
Wow.
just by
How they stand.
who's being responsible, who's
Yes.
making the joke. Yeah, all
Who-
of that. Posture around the bed.
Yeah.
And then so on Tuesdays and Thursdays, for example, one of us is on the hot seat for an hour and a half, and you're debriefing an encounter.
And they're just asking questions. They're going, well, why this and why not that?
That's right.
Or-
Yeah. So it's a particular tool called a verbatim. I do write about it in the book.
Really
And
good
so
tool.
you have to write up a paper on the encounter. The magic of it is you draw the encounter up on a table. So on one side of the table, it's actually what did he say? What did I say? What did she say? But then on the other side is what was I thinking and feeling at the time? So it's like a self-analysis thing.
Yep.
You write it out, you hand it out. Then you read it like a table reading from a play or a TV show.
Yeah, almost like they're doing a script.
Yep, it's a script.
Huh.
That whole thing takes 20, 30 minutes. And then the rest of the time, your peers and supervisors are trying to get you to know yourself. So they're not so much interested in, here's how you should have done it. In fact, they actually stop mulligans. What's going on in you? So Steve, like we noticed that your shortest visits are labor and delivery. What's that? Well, I'm really uncomfortable around like butts and vaginas. Like just really uncomfortable. I
That
don't
is-
know.
That's a quote that could just be snipped out.
Yeah.
I'm really uncomfortable around butts and vaginas.
Yeah.
That's a strong quote.
Yeah, it's a good quote.
It's a strong
Yeah.
quote.
But the gift of it, and that was an actual conversation we had.
I
by the
bet
way.
it
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
Because labor and delivery are calling the supervisor saying, the chaplain you've assigned to us is neglecting us. We need him.
Yeah.
We need his care.
Right.
But I'm embarrassed as a man.
Yeah.
And where am I supposed to be?
You're in
and
this
when?
really vulnerable, awkward space.
I'm a
of
kid,
people-
24-year-old, brand new married. Well, I don't know anything.
I don't know anything about this. Right.
But the gift of chaplaincy was it became a safe environment to be raw. I remember the first time one of the people said to me, I think the reason you avoid labor and delivery is Susan is a gorgeous nurse, and I think you're sexually attracted to her. Like just calling it out.
Boom.
And I'm like, well, of course I'm not. I'm married. That was my
And they're
answer.
like, what?
They're like, no, that's not the way this goes. That's not the way it works at all.
Exactly.
And I had a fantastic Bible college experience. I know people who rag on college and seminary. I loved both.
Yeah.
However, the college I did go to, it's hard to know, was it the college? Was it my stage of life? There was no room for that.
Right.
There was room to be a really good-looking pastor. By good-looking,
Yeah.
I don't mean physically. I just mean I look good as a pastor.
Or for the neck up, they're doing all the work they
That's
can.
right.
Like-
Brain work. I
Right.
could quote 2 Kings coming out of college
Right.
really well. I could mansplain with a Bible verse, which we all know is what the Lord requires.
Once. That's what
Yeah,
he
right.
wants. Yeah.
So a chaplaincy taught me what to me has saved my life is all God wants is for me to be exactly human-sized. When I had the courage to look into the darkness of my life, God's already there. I thought I was keeping it from him. I was certainly keeping it from others. But of course, what's true is they could see it. I'm the last to see it. So I finally have the courage to dive into my dark side. And there's the Lord doing his work.
Yeah.
And according to my chaplain supervisors, his most powerful. Peter Keyes, great Episcopal priest, he was my boss. He's like, you guys are always trying to graduate from God's power is made perfect in my weakness. Like you're trying to graduate. He's like, what if it's always that's
Yeah.
actually the truth? So then I learned how to walk into a room weak,
Yeah.
tired, angry. Sometimes I'd be angry at someone for dying because it means my meal's going to be cold.
Right.
Stupid stuff like that.
Yes.
And if I didn't do chaplaincy, what I would have said is, a good pastor shouldn't think that.
Right.
Bad pastor.
You're not allowed to feel that,
I'm
think
gonna feel that.
Right.
But chaplaincy said, feel it, own it, name it, accept it. Okay, now die to it.
Every month on the We Are Vineyard podcast, we introduce a new book or recommended resource to dig in deeper. For March, we recommended that everyone reads Managing Leadership Anxiety by Steve Cuss. If you've been enjoying this conversation between Steve and Jay, you won't want to miss it. Managing Leadership Anxiety is available through Vineyard Resources and wherever books are sold.
even the way you're describing the group, like to have people that can point out what you're avoiding.
Oh my goodness.
Because what's so hard is you don't even know what you're avoiding.
Blind
right?
spot.
It's
Blind
subconscious. I'm not thinking I'm avoiding a thing, but I am. I'm avoiding a person or a topic or an experience.
So I'm raised in a water regeneration culture. I go to that Bible college. I'm taught that. Baptism by immersion. C.S. Lewis probably isn't in heaven because I don't know. It's... And I'll just also say our movement's come a long way.
Okay,
Thank you, Jesus. We've come a long way. But
that's all in your head. That's the wiring, right?
So I become a chaplain, and somewhere along the lines, here's the deal, Jay. If I knew this when I interviewed, I would not have taken the job. That's how serious it was. I find out 6 weeks in, they sprinkle dead babies, stillborn babies. They have a little seashell, and they have a little ceremony, and they call it baptism. So I have to baptize a dead baby.
As part of your job.
Part of my job. So I actually tried to manipulate backups. We've got 6 of us. Maybe you could do that.
Yeah.
It's against my theology.
Against my conscience, right?
Somewhere, I don't know, several months in, 2 a.m. page, I'm overnight, and it's, here I go, baby's been stillborn. And I'm carrying my Bible college professors into that room, and I'm actually, I can't believe I'm doing this, I'm teaching a grieving couple what Acts 2:38 means. Now, all that's happened is these nurses need some ritual because they grieve every loss.
Yeah.
They're not numb. They just need a ritual. They call it baptism. And all they need me to do is shut up, get a shell, tell them how sorry I am, and do something.
Yeah.
But instead, I'm actually mansplaining theology. That was a low point for me. I verbatim that experience, and it was such a low point. This is how ridiculous our theological beliefs can get when they're not true. I didn't tell anybody that story for years. I didn't even have the courage to say, here's what I did.
Right.
Here's what's also ridiculous. The Bible college professors on my shoulders, in my mind, they're harsh taskmasters. They're judging me. In reality, they're probably like, dude, get over yourself and help
Do whatever
us.
you got to do. Right.
They're probably very kind, but this is what we do with the giants in our shoulders. So I verbatim this experience. I still remember Allison, one of the chaplain residents with me. She was this phenomenal, straight-talking Southern Baptist, Southern Tennessee woman. She was amazing. She'd had a miscarriage when she was young. She was in her 40s. And she looked at me and she said, well, Steve, I had a miscarriage and here was my baptism. And she reenacted a nurse giving her a paper bag and her taking her dead baby and tipping it in the bag.
Wow.
And what she was saying to me is, no one gave me a chance to grieve or to, and you have robbed these.
Yeah.
Now, until you can let someone speak that boldly to you, you will never grow, I don't think.
Yeah.
Because I've never forgotten, like Allison taught me something I needed to hear.
Yeah.
And it profoundly impacted my life. And I did something like 50-something verbatims.
Wow.
And they were all intense. Like they're super brave to do it.
Yeah. Well, and to think, I mean, even the little experience you're describing, how few people in ministry have those experiences.
Right.
I mean, you go through Bible college, you end up on staff at a church or something. You might sit in on a few pastoral meetings for some training. If you're in more of a counseling program, you get some of that, right? You have a supervisor who might sit in or talk you through things. But if you're not in a counseling stream, you end up doing pastoral meetings, weddings, funerals, any number of pastoral random experiences without any external, on-the-job, verbatim training. And I know for your church, I mean, because I've gotten to sit in and see some of the work you do, you've done a lot of that training for your staff.
That's right, yeah.
It's like chaplaincy, but you're actually doing it within a church staff.
Our big test was, is leadership traumatic enough to generate the same discomfort that chaplaincy generates? Turns out, thanks be to God, yes, it is. Church leadership
it certainly
has plenty of pain.
Yeah. Well, but the loneliness. I mean, so if you go out and you plant a church, for example, which I know that I don't know if we would technically call it.
No, I would not call myself a church planter.
But you took over a church.
A 5.5-year-old church.
Right.
Yep.
But if you plant a church or even you take over a church sight unseen, you are kind of alone.
Right.
Who's going to be able to reflect reality? Who watches you in the real day-to-day moments? Says, so what happened there? seems like you're hurt or upset by that, or you're not.
Yeah.
You haven't followed up with that person, or what happened, or.
And everyone gets defensive, but the good stuff is your group letting you get defensive, and then, okay, now that that's over with, let's go deeper. That's where the change happened for me. And then I kept running into myself. The same proclivities. So verbatims after a while got frustrating because I'm like, well, there I go again.
Yeah. Same tendency.
Yeah.
Trying to fix, trying to talk my way around a thing.
Charm or be the big guy in the room, you know.
Wow. What incredible training.
I'm not smarter than you. It's just at 24 with 200 and something, 300 deaths.
Yeah.
That'll do it. That'll get you digging a deep well.
A lot quickly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so you move from that to then
I went to seminary.
Yeah. And then you go to, were you in Vegas first?
Yeah. After seminary, I went to Vegas. So in seminary, it does feel like the hand of God. We got a brand new counseling professor the year I came in, and he was a systems guru. He brought in Bateson. So, you know, everyone talks about Bowen and Friedman. And of course, you and I know, Jay, there's all these streams of systems theory.
Yes.
The problem, I think, is that because Bowen's the founder, too many people are loyal to him.
Yeah.
But Bateson and the Mental Research Institute guys, mind-blowing.
Real good.
Jack Holland brought them, and I just went deep in seminary.
Yeah.
And then,
and it's helping you process some of your experiences, I'm sure, from chaplaincy.
Right.
Now you have a grid where you're going, oh, that's what was going on there.
Right. Yeah,
Wow.
you can kind of rework it.
Yeah.
And then the Bateson stuff is all about why do humans get stuck? How do they get themselves into trouble? And then how do they stay in trouble? And then how is it their best attempts to solve it make the problem worse?
Make it worse.
And I was like, oh, that's my life. That describes my life.
Pretty much everybody's life. Yeah, right. Totally.
Yeah. And in fact, I think is actually the gospel with sin, you know, sin, and then what we do to make up for it is what's the problem.
Yes.
So I got all nerded out on that. And then, had the incredible opportunity to get a job at a massive church in Las Vegas, basically be the second in command for a crisis intervention wing. We had a very extensive crisis intervention. My boss, Mark Welchel, was a pastor and an MFT therapist.
Wow.
What a gift.
What a gift.
And so we nerded out on systems. I mean, he'd let me sit in his office and talk. And of course, he's properly trained. He's actually an MFT.
Right, exactly.
And then Mark's management style was very empowering. So even when I interviewed with Mark, he showed me the ministries that we were over. And he said, well, which ones do you want to run? I'm like, well, Mark, you're the boss.
Yeah, you tell me.
Yeah.
That's my job, right?
He's like, no, you choose what you want. I'll do the rest. So I picked my favorites. And then he said, it was mind-blowing to this day, he said, well, that's half of your job. Now you tell me what do you want to do?
Wow.
And here's a $600,000 budget. Now, you can't just go, you have to propose, but what do you want to do?
You can do anything you want.
And I'd written
my
my master's thesis on systemic poverty. And I said, I want to set up reciprocity and dignity in our outreach work, because I think charity is undignifying.
Yeah.
He's like, let's get after it.
Let's do that.
So we had homeless guys signing up to volunteer in our children's ministry at our church, and he let me experiment. And of course, systems theory is a gift in crisis intervention. You know, you have somebody who they got their eviction notice 10 weeks ago, they put it off, and then at 3 p.m. on a Friday before they're evicted, they load up their possessions and their kids, and they make me tell their kids they're getting evicted and it's my fault, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Just desperate techniques that some people use. Systems help me survive all that.
See what's going on.
Still connect to that person without being mad at them, all of that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So that's good training. And then, do you go right from there to Broomfield?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought there was an in-between, but
No. So I was in Vegas from 2001, right before the Twin Towers fell, much like you.
Yeah.
And then September of 2005 to Vegas. So 4.25 years, I think, in Vegas.
And then you turn up here, take over church is 5 years old.
Yep. Church of 150, something like that.
Well, and what a great church. I
Yeah,
mean,
great
seriously,
church.
You've done such a great job. I've gotten to come and be with your team and see folks.
It's a great group of people. Always was. We stepped into a great group of people.
Yeah.
Like, that's what's also true, is we didn't necessarily build culture. I mean, I built a lot of culture, but a lot of it, Jay, was already there.
Yeah.
What was surprising is, okay, so this is 2005, so I've been like fully nerding out on systems theory for 9 years to the point where people are like, can you talk about
Just
something
stop
else?
talking about it, right, yeah.
I was pretty
I know that
fanatical.
feeling.
Yeah. And then suddenly I'm lead pastoring and it's not working. Like my tools are not.
All the things are failing.
It's not. I'm highly anxious. I can't sleep. Critical email, and I'm churning on it for weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is going on? So what I tell people is not very encouraging, but I'm like, well, okay. So I was a trauma chaplain. I worked on a ranch for delinquent teens, and I was a crisis interventionist in Vegas. Piece of cake compared to suburban lead pastor. That's what I tell people. I'm like, nothing will test your mettle like lead pastoring.
You just offered a really an encouraging word to many people. Yeah.
It's just harder.
I mean, and we could talk about this for hours, I imagine, but what would you think are the key, as far as you can tell now,
I think.
what are the key things?
When I was in Vegas, I was there when Gene Apple was the lead pastor, and then he left and went to Willow, and then Judd Wilhite came in, both really high-quality human beings. I remember with Judd, somebody would criticize Judd to me, and I didn't know I was doing it at the time, but I was getting out of the way so the arrow would hit Judd. I look back now and see that. I never took an arrow for him.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, he can handle it.
Yeah, he's Judd. He's like a big guy. He's in charge.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think insecurely there was also like, well, he's getting paid.
Right.
Some of that stupid
Yep.
stuff. I then become the lead pastor, and I think I'm naturally hyper-responsible. I'm a classic over-functioner.
Right.
And I'm insecure. I want people to like me. That's a terrible combination with a struggling church plant where I'm the photocopy tech. Like, I'm all of it.
Yeah.
And Sunday's coming whether I'm ready or not. I'm not very good at preaching, so I have to learn how to do it in front of my people. And so I'm getting up. I did this a few times, and I'm saying some version of, hey, if you know the week I had, you'd understand what's about to happen to all of us. Like,
You just start confessing.
just apologizing. Like, this is going to be bad. Let's face it. Come on, let's face it. Oh, man.
Not a strong intro. No.
Not great.
Would not recommend
Very confusing to the guests. I was in our new member lunch my first year, and Eric Muller, he says, he was a guest. He's at the new member lunch. He says in front of the whole room, Steve, I think you should stop telling us you don't know if you can be a lead pastor. It's very confusing to us because we like what.
It's going great,
We
man.
keep coming back because we
I'm
like your
here.
preaching.
Yeah. I've already said yes.
And I'm like,
Are you
Eric,
trying to get me to leave? Yeah, right.
thank you, Eric. That's very helpful. I'm going to work on my insecurity.
I
So,
love it.
so that's really when my book and my class was born. Was me realizing, I know this theory informally. Now I need to build an actual like rule of life. And then after working it for several years in 2012, okay, can I teach it? And then I had some early students.
Yep.
Incredibly patient with me. And what I coach people to do is until you teach it, you're not quite the student you want to be.
Yep.
And I just tell people, just get a group of people and say, I've never taught this before.
Yep.
So right now we certify coaches in our tools, and every coach has to have their first coaching session without us. And our coach, we just say, just get it out of the way. Tell them, you're my first ever. And I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But if you're willing, I'm willing.
Yeah.
And then maybe you give them a discount. Like,
Yeah.
maybe maybe they're free. And that's what I did in 2012. I grabbed 4 of my staff. I said, look, I had this experience as a chaplain. It changed my life. I've been using it informally. I've been working because as a lead pastor, I've been struggling. I'd like to try to teach it to you if you're willing to be guinea pigs. And now 2 of them are certified coaches, and they're all in. And they would say, I mean, if Renee and Jimmy were here, they'd say, look, for the first few years, every year it was wildly different. But then he wrote the book, and that made him figure out.
Yeah. Tighten it up.
Yep.
Yep.
And even now, I mean, the book's been out, 3 years? And I don't know how many workshops, but I teach it a lot differently now.
Of course. Yeah. Well,
Just keep improving
because you're
it.
right. In the teaching or in the writing, it forces you to hone what you're thinking and doing.
Yeah.
And you get feedback like, this thing that I thought was so clever and helpful doesn't seem to help anybody. Let me pivot to another way of doing that.
It is a helpful, studying stand-up comedy helped me. Their ability to know before they tell the joke whether it's going to land. And then, I read Malcolm Gladwell, and he says 10,000 hours, and I start to think, that's a little light. I think I've got more than that.
Yes.
And I'm not at the novice stage, but I don't feel expert.
Yeah.
I still feel like, man, I'm kind of got this tiger by the tail. I'm trying to figure out how to explain it, how to live it myself. And then what's also true, Jay, is, as you know, I've pivoted away from local pastoring, and now this is what I do full time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more anxious than I've been in a long time.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm quite well.
It's a big change. Right?
January was just unhinged anxiety, financial security, all of that.
Well, it's real.
And then the Lord provides, and I'm like, I'm fine. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute, but tomorrow, so...
Well, and as I've watched you, the fruit of success is as scary as the lack, right? So...
I watch every moral failure.
Mm-hmm.
I study it, because I think I am, Lisa and I were talking about it the other night. I'm like, I'm not afraid, I don't want to do that, but that's the concern, is just, I don't want to be a cliche. Yeah.
Well, and I think we all tell ourselves if we would be something else, like if we are a little more successful, or once the kids get to this age, once the kids are in school, life will get easier. Once the kids are out of the home.
Yeah.
But all of those are false horizons, because I've talked to, I don't know how many pastors are like, if I could just pay my bills, pay the church bills, life's going to be easier. And then it's not.
Here's what's crazy. When we were transitioning out of the church last year, I started worrying about financial security for 2022. So I'm like, oh man, am I going to be able to provide?
Right.
And then January to June got booked really quickly. I don't have a single opening January to June.
Wow.
So I'm like, Lord,
turns out
you are better to me.
Yes.
And that lasts about a week. And then I say, you know what though, Lord, July, that back end of the calendar is looking really empty.
Right.
Oh my, things are doomed. Now, as of this podcast, I might have 2 openings for the whole year of 2022.
Wow.
But only if they're geographically connected to other things I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm already saying, oh man, 2023 is looking empty. So this has been the story of my faith journey, is God is good. And I say, God's so good. And then a week later, I'm like, no, he's not.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
Or for me, I remember planting a church. Every week, I would do everything. We'd set up, and it would occur to me, what if nobody comes?
Right.
Like literally nobody.
Right.
Like what if it's just the worship team,
me and Danielle,
whoever made the coffee.
Right.
Oh, and then they'd come, and I would always be like, I can't believe they're here.
Yeah.
And then you take a risk to like maybe buy a building, build a ministry, do whatever you're going to do next. Yeah. And then you're like, but what if we outkicked our coverage? Now we have a room that 300 people could be in. What if there's only like 80 people? What will that mean? And so, we all those false horizons, we all have our own insecurities, but I was just talking to a guy this last week. They have a church, I think they're at 3,000 people. Their auditorium, they're just built as 4,500. And he's going, what have we done?
Yeah. I get it.
And I get it.
I think there is something beautiful in it, in that I don't think God owes me anything.
Right.
So there's also that. It's like
there's a humility if read the right way. Yeah.
And
up to me.
The Western sloppy language of God's blessing. You and I have both been in poverty-stricken countries.
Yeah.
You're like, they're blessed. So God doesn't owe me
a
speaking fee, but it's been an interesting journey for sure.
Oh, you're doing such a great job, and I love the book. I mean, we're recommending to read the book.
Yeah.
Look through it. You have all kinds of resources and coaching and ways that people can get certified or participate with the material. I mean, so we'll put your website in the show notes.
Yeah.
Then you'll be with us at the LTM.
Yeah,
to
April.
Run us through some of it, which will be really, really fun.
Really
those
fun.
are there.
We'll have fun with anxiety.
Or just noticing what's already there, really.
Yeah.
Or maybe you'll create some. I don't know.
Maybe. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'll intentionally talk about racial issues or politics just to test the
pull
room.
people up. Well, the good news is we have a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
We're going to go into another election cycle, so that's exciting.
It is so exciting.
So that means every pastor is going to
It's good practice.
freak out and not know what to do and get all the emails. And so your tools are super useful. They're very helpful. I'm so grateful you're going to come spend some time with us. I just really appreciate making time. And can we come back and talk to you some more?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is always fun.
Cool. Well, we'll talk again. And I'm in the in-between time, we're going to hypnotize a chicken. And I will, I'll tell everybody how that went.
Yeah, we can video that. That could be like a bonus. When you get Patreon, that can be on the Patreon.
My Patreon is hypnotizing a chicken.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thanks, Steve.
Yeah, man. Yeah, good to visit with you.
The We Are Vineyard podcast is a production from the team at Vineyard USA. If you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. Leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Connect with us online for additional resources. Our website is vineyardusa.org, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at VineyardUSA. Thanks for listening. See you next week.